Before we start the notebook today, I want to ask you a question. What do you know about parallel lines? If you're like most of my former Algebra 1 students from previous years, you probably said that parallel lines never touch, which is true. If I draw two parallel lines, they're lines that go on forever in both directions, but they're never going to cross. But why don't they cross? Well, the reason is that they have the same slope. They're always going up and over the same amount, because if one line was steeper than the other, then they would have to cross, which we don't want. So for this class, when I ask you what do we know about parallel lines, rather than say they don't touch, which is true, the important thing for us to remember in Algebra 1 is that parallel lines have the same slope. So if we want to write the equation of parallel lines, we want to again know that parallel lines will have the same slope. So from the equation they give me, we want to identify what the slope is, and this is the only information that we're going to need. If necessary, convert it into slope-intercept form so that we know what the slope is. Then you're going to take your slope and plug it in for m. Plug in your point into point slope form into your x1 and y1, and just like last time, leave your x and y alone. And then we'll solve that equation for y to get it into slope-intercept form. So for this problem, I want to write the equation of the line. I know that y equals negative 3x plus 1 is parallel to the line, and it has to go through the point 4, 2. So this is the symbol for parallel. It's two parallel lines. So I know that parallel lines have the same slope. So I have to find the slope. Luckily, this is in slope-intercept form, so I know the slope is just my number with x. So my slope is negative 3, and I do not need anything else from the equation, just the slope. So now I have a point and a slope. Better use point slope form. Y minus my y value of 2 equals m, my slope, x minus x1, which is 4. Solve for y. Keep the left side the same for now, so I can simplify the right by distributing negative 3x plus 12, and then add 2 on both sides to get y equals a negative 3x plus 14. Number 2, I want the equation of the line. Y equals 2/5 x minus 3 is going to be parallel to it, and it goes through the point 10, negative 4. So again, when I see parallel lines, I know parallel lines have the same slope. So what's the slope here? It's 2/5. So don't need any of that. So m is 2/5, and that's my point. So again, point slope form, because I have a point and a slope. Y minus y1, negative 4, equals m, my slope of 2/5 x minus x1. I will simplify the left side by changing that minus and negative to plus 4. Distribute over here, 2/5 x, and then I need to find out what 2/5 times a negative 10 is. 5 and 10 have a common factor of 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. Negative 10 divided by 5 is a negative 2. So 2 times negative 2 is a negative 4. Last step, get y by itself by subtracting 4 on both sides, and y is 2/5 x minus 8. Now let's think about what we remember about perpendicular lines. Well, perpendicular lines do touch, but in a special way. If I have two perpendicular lines, they always form a right angle. That's what makes them perpendicular. What else do I notice about these two lines? Well, they're definitely not the same slope. I see one's positive and one is negative, so they're going to have different signs. And in fact, besides one being positive and one being negative, their slopes are what we call reciprocals. That means we flip them upside down. So if one of the slopes was a half, the reciprocal of that is going to be 2 over 1. And if one is positive, the other slope is negative. So perpendicular lines have what we will call opposite reciprocal slopes. So if I want to write the equation of perpendicular lines, the first thing I'll think about is the fact that perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes. So opposite means we'll change the sign. If it's positive, I'll make it negative. If it's negative, we'll make it positive. And reciprocal means we're taking that fraction and we're flipping it upside down. So if it's 2/3, the reciprocal is 3/2. So we'll use the perpendicular line to find the slope, and if necessary, we'll rewrite it into slope-intercept form so that we can find the slope easily. For example, if they give you the equation in standard form, you're going to have to solve it for y first. We're going to plug in the slope that we found in for m, and then plug in the point into x1 and y1, leaving our x and y alone. Once you've plugged it in point slope form, solve it for y to get it in slope intercept form. So I want to find the equation of the line that's perpendicular. That's what this symbol means, because you'll see it's two perpendicular lines making a right angle. Perpendicular to y equals -4x plus 6 that goes through the point -8, 3. So I need to find the slope. Unlike parallel lines, I can't just circle the slope here. I need to find the opposite reciprocal. So I'm starting with the slope of -4. I need the opposite reciprocal. So opposite means changing the sign. Since this slope is negative, my new slope has to be positive, and then flip the fraction. But wait a second, this isn't a fraction. How can I turn an integer into a fraction? Well, I can put it over 1. So then the reciprocal of 4 over 1 is 1 over 4. So my slope is positive 1/4. Now I can write it in point slope form. Y minus y1, which is 3, equals m, my slope of 1/4, x minus x1, which is a -8. I'll go ahead and change that minus and negative into a nice plus, and let's solve for y. Keep my y minus 3 while I simplify the sides. Distribute that 1/4 x plus, what is 1/4 of 8? Well, 8 and 4 have a common factor of 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 8 divided by 4 is 2. So it's going to be 2. And then add 3 on both sides to get y equals 1/4 x plus 5. Number 2, I want the equation of the line perpendicular to y equals 5 through the point 2, 4. So looking at y equals 5, what's the slope? Well, it's not 5. In fact, there's no x, so I can't look at the number with x. Oh, wait a second, this is a special case. This is a Hoy Vux. So if it's y equals a number, I'm using Hoy, which means my slope is 0. Well, how do I find the opposite reciprocal of 0? Let's think about it. Well, I can put this over 1 if I want. I guess I could say it's positive and make it negative, although it's a 0, so I'm not really sure how that'll work out. And if I find the reciprocal of 0 over 1, that's 1 over 0. But what's a -1 divided by 0? What's anything divided by 0? That would be undefined. So my slope is undefined, which means it's going to have to be a special case. That's going to be Vux. So vertical line, undefined slope, the equation has to be x equals a number. Well, if it has to go through this point, what x value does this point have? 2. So the answer is x equals 2. Another way you could think about this problem is, if this part's a little confusing, think about what a slope of 0 looks like. I know a slope of 0 is a horizontal line, because that's what the H in Hoy stands for. If I want to draw another line that's perpendicular to it to get a right angle, well, a perpendicular line would have to be vertical to get a right angle. And a vertical line, that's my Vux. So keep in mind that your Hoy and your Vux lines are always going to be perpendicular to each other. But anyways, x equals 2 is the answer. Last question here, I want to be perpendicular to y equals 3 have x minus 2, and it needs to go through the point 6, 4. This time I can find my slope fairly easily. I want the opposite reciprocal. So it's positive, so the opposite means my slope will be negative this time. Reciprocal, we go from 3 halves to 2 thirds. So my slope is negative 2 thirds. Here's my point. Let's write it in point slope form. Y minus y1 equals m x minus x1. Solve for y. Y minus 4 equals negative 2 thirds x. And let's figure this part out. Times negative 6. Well, I know a negative times a negative will be positive. 3 and 6 have a common factor of 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 6 divided by 3 is 2. Multiply across and we get a positive 4. Add 4 on both sides to get y equals a negative 2 thirds x plus 8.